On episode 24 of the All Things Interesting podcast, I am joined by activist, political satirist, and 2020 presidential candidate Vermin Supreme. We talk about his unique journey into politics through activism and his 2020 presidential campaign while exploring the underlying issues in the current political system through satire and humor. Our conversation sheds light on his over the top campaign as he shares an unapologetic look into the controversies and challenges of the current political system with a heavy dose of satire and humor. Are you in on the joke? If you enjoy the show or episode, please subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast platform and drop a comment. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Vermin Supreme. Vermin Supreme, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. It's really great to be back. I know we've attempted this very show several times, and hopefully the third time is the charm.
Exactly. So I know there you have kind of a cult following, uh, namely because of the boot that you wear on your head. It is ultimately your shtick here. Explain, how did that come to be?
Well, the boot is sort of an image that is associated with me. Indeed, it's not a literal trademark because I don't have it trademarked per se, but it is certainly something that has been associated with me for quite some time visually, of course. And it is indeed a rubber boot that I wear on my head. And yes, there have been several versions over the years. And of course, it is a magical boot. The boot actually possesses certain magical powers. To wit, the magic of the boot has allowed me to amplify my First Amendment free speech voice exponentially. It has allowed me to magically communicate with millions of people across the globe and attract earned media from all over the flat Earth, if you will. And so it's a beautiful thing, and it has been associated with me, of course. When people generally ask me about the boot, I have a throwaway line that the boot stands for all that is good in America. That being the ability to wear a boot on your head if you so choose. I also tell the media at times that the boot is a pile of shit and that they are the flies that buzz around it. The boot is, of course, a signifier in a sense, so that if a person sees me walking towards them, they are immediately alerted that what they might be on the receiving end of may not be linear. And it is also something that I think the simplest and bestest thing for me is that if you take a photograph of me with wearing the boot on my head in a crowd or place or time, and you show that to a child and say, "Hey, kid, what's wrong with this picture?" They immediately know what's wrong with it, and so that is it's a simple and elegant yet extremely effective device that I have used to stand out from the rest of all of the other candidates forever, I guess. And
So it's pretty much garnered you all the attention you've received from the news media, from all your fans. It's been essentially the beacon for which everything you stand upon.
well, it would stand upon if I was standing upside down, I suppose. The boot being on my head. And it's been very interesting because a lot of people have a real adverse reaction to it sometimes. And a lot of times, like I'll try and get into an event and they will try and prevent me from entering the event. And the boot on my head is really the sole excuse and the sole reasoning. And it leads to some very interesting conversations as I try and tease out exactly what the difficulties are. And for a long time, I really didn't know. I was genuinely, surprised and offended that that was their take. But Pagan Kennedy one time figured out around 2004, and that is if I enter a room with a boot on my head, number one, I am the tallest thing in the room, pretty much, and it attracts. It's like a media beacon, and they all zero in like a trout after a worm. And so I can see why just the presence of the boot at times can be a fairly disruptive event, just because I think it just messes with people's reality, number one, and number two, all the fans just immediately start coming at me. I mean, at the Bernie victory speech, I entered the arena, and there was like I was mobbed by people who, and this is during Bernie's speech, people just out of the bleachers to come run up to me and get their selfies and stuff. But so it is magical boot, but of course it works in conjunction with the actual presentation and the content that I'm presenting.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, traditionally, I'm known for the four primary platform planks. Of course, mandatory toothbrushing laws. Gingivitis has been eroding the gum line of this great nation of ours and must be stopped.
You carry around a toothbrush as well, don't you?
Occasionally, I do carry around a 6-foot toothbrush. Just to hammer that home, that mandatory dental hygiene is a very important thing to me. And of course, it's not about the secret dental police or the dental re-education centers or the dental maintenance detention facilities or the government issued toothpaste containing an addictive and harmless substance, nor even the DNA gene splicing to create a race of winged monkeys to act as tooth fairy enforcers. What the mandatory toothbrushing law is really all about is, of course, strong teeth for strong America. And that's a platform plank that I've been presenting for a number of years now. Of course, I think it saw its widest distribution in 2012 when I went viral and then turned into a meme when I glitter bombed Randall Terry at the lesser known candidate forum up in New Hampshire back in December 2011, I guess it was. And of course, there's the free ponies for all Americans, which is a very important platform plank. Of course, it is a federal pony identification system. You must have your pony with you at all times. And arguably, the phrase free ponies, which I introduced and really set loose in the world in a big way at that viral debate, it has been assimilated by the media. And
I'm going to pause you there. Where did that idea come from for a free pony for every American? Is that simply a poke at the promises that politicians make but can't keep?
Well, ultimately, yes, and that's what it was adopted to ultimately mean. That's the usage that it has acquired. But when I put it up, yes, that was the intent. It came into being, I think it was around 2004, when I would be at a bunch of demonstrations and I would have my bullhorn, and during a lot of these marches for whatever, one of these standard chants is, "What do we want? When do we want it?" Usually it's like they want whatever,
right?
And when do they want it now? And so I would be at these big demonstrations, and you'd have like hundreds of people shouting, one person with a bullhorn, "What do you want? What do we want?" And everybody else like, "Peace!" And "When do we want it now?" And back in the day, I was really into like sort of subverting and killing chants, and I could pretty effectively sort of take over any chant that they threw out and change it up and essentially make it impossible for them to continue doing it. So so it was like, "What do we want?" And I would shout out ponies, and it eventually became the predominant thing that people would yell out when the leader of the chant would yell out, "What do we want?" The whole crowd was yelling ponies, and it was just so effing funny that's where it sort of launched. It wasn't the critique that it became. But then eventually did become the free ponies for all Americans, which is also a jobs creation program. It's going to re-up the agricultural infrastructure with all the pony poop. It's going to invigorate. It's a post-fossil fuel economy idea essentially. It's just a vision. It's an example of trying to ask people why things are the way they are and creating some space in their head by presenting something very different, but if you think about it, not too, I mean, absolutely far-fetched, yes, but once again, not out of the realm of totally incomprehension.
So you're asking people to really just critically think here about
I,
these things.
ultimately, yes. I think that's my primary mission. And of course, a lot of the things that I present, or myself, I mean, different people ascribe different levels of import to what I do. Some people think, oh, it's a very important to democracy what you do, Vermin. Other people think it's just stupider than anything. And they're both right. Everybody's right. And yes, there's several, levels to the free ponies or mandatory toothbrushing laws, where the absurdity of it and the funniness of it is very attractive to kids or people who don't even need to see anything further. But then to anybody who starts to think about it, I believe most of it's pretty clear. In fact, when up in the 2016 New Hampshire primary, I had several good encounters with several of the duopoly candidates. One of which was Chris Christie. If you type in Chris Christie and Vermin Supreme, you'll see a video of me interacting. And I asked him about the mandatory toothbrushing, and he immediately agreed that toothbrushing is important. So he gave me that one. And then I asked him about the free ponies program later on during the encounter, after I got thrown out of the place. But at first I asked him about the free pony program, and he said he didn't believe in free ponies, and so I called him pony hater. And later on in the encounter, I called it back and said, Chris Christie, why do you hate ponies? And he came back with, I don't hate ponies, only free ponies. You want to So he understood it very clearly. I also had an encounter with Ted Cruz. If you type in Ted Cruz and Vermin Supreme, I asked him, I led with the pony question. He said his daughters loved ponies. And then I followed up with the mandatory toothbrushing question. And he essentially turned it inside out and deconstructed it and immediately gave back to me what it was I was critiquing. He said, no, I don't believe in the nanny state. And, and of course they shouldn't make things mandatory. And yeah, I think people get it. I think it's fairly straightforward. Of course,
I'll be honest, it's not even over the top though for brushing your teeth and making it mandatory. It sounds like the most logical ideas of your platform relative to zombie apocalypse awareness, time travel research. Yes,
it came out of that platform plank, the toothbrushing one, came into being. It was a direct response to the seatbelt laws.
Seatbelt laws?
When they put in the mandatory seatbelt laws, I thought to myself, well, buckling up, it's a great idea. It's a good idea for safety, but really, do they need to make it a law? And of course, at that time, it was just a suggestion, but then it became a ticketable offense, and then it became a reason they could pull you over.
Right.
And so I said, what could be the next logical, stupidest law that they could possibly implement? And I came up with brush your teeth, it's the law, because originally their stickers that they put out was buckle up, it's the law. And so it was a straightforward response and a riff on that. And then the dystopian nightmare just sort of tacked onto it. So it's sort of it's the old 1-2. It's the nanny state, saying that they're trying to make you safe and protect you from something, and then they're turning it into something that falls into full-on enforcement. And ultimately, of course, police encounters can ultimately get you killed, as time and time again. And of course, the zombie energy program. There's just sort of cultural touch points, and the zombies people really like their zombies, and so I brought that in and decided that actually it was one of my constituents, quite frankly, that came up with the actual idea of harnessing the awesome power of zombies by putting them in a giant turbine hamster wheel technology. And I thought
these all sound like metaphors you're trying to relate to the general public with some of these platforms.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair, for sure. The time travel plank, the only candidate who promised is to fully fund research, time travel research. And that's sort of the key right there, fully fund the research. And then I followed up with the promise that I'm going to go back in time and kill baby Hitler, which is essentially, just a straight up crib from an ethics exam. You know, would you go back in time and kill baby Hitler? It's just a sort of think piece. It's been out there forever, but I thought it would be a real fun literal plank to take up. And when people call me on it, I say, oh, well, it's really it's just a boondoggle essentially. I tie it into like the drone program where, you know, we're just going to get every congressional district to get a piece of it, and that way it will become something that you can't is much harder to overturn.
So before we get into your presidential campaign of 2020, I want to rewind for a moment and really just understand how far back does all of this really go? Your interest in politics mainly. Is there a story behind it?
Well, certainly, I've always been halfway interested. You know, a little bit interested in politics, but not. I didn't have a real political consciousness or a real political awareness. I don't believe. In the '80s, I was in Baltimore. I dropped out of art school, and I was just there because it was cheap rent. And for a while there, I was doing bookings and promotions at a couple nightclubs in Baltimore, and that is where I became Vermin Supreme.
That's not your real name, is it?
It's my street legal name. It's on my driver's license.
Oh, wow.
If that's not my real name, I don't know what it is, by golly.
Well, is it your name given to you at birth, though?
I wish. But, you know, I've been, my wife of over 30 years has known me by nothing but, and my mother knew me by that name. You know, essentially, the name that I once used is now a dead name. It's totally the equivalent of that. It's something that is vestigial. It sort of fell by the wayside as nobody used it, the old one, and everybody knew me by the new one. And that's what I told the probate judge. It's like, it's just my name now. And so I took on the name in '86, and it wasn't it was more because, you know, it was the tail end of the punk rock days, and it was the art weirdo scene. So it wasn't unusual for a lot of different people and artists and musicians to be taking on different names or identities. And Vermin Supreme was mine. All booking agents, all club owners, all promoters were Vermin, and I was going to be the Vermin Supreme. And that was the initial character, if you will. It was more of a stage character. I had like about 50 different crazy suit jackets behind the bar, and you know, chomped on this fake cigar and all that stuff. And then I that didn't last very long, actually. And I was on my way out of Baltimore, but on my way out of Baltimore, I was still looking for something to do in Baltimore, and just totally non-political, out of absolute boredom, and just looking for an interesting project to do. I declared one night over a pitcher of beer that I was going to run for mayor of Baltimore.
There was no reason behind that. No political issue you saw with government. Nothing.
Not at all. Not at all. It was really just you know, something to do, just to continue the shameless self-promotion aspect of things, and thought that would be an interesting vehicle. Then I burnt out on Baltimore, and one of the things that I did that helped me leave Baltimore was the Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament. That was a march that went from LA to DC, and it rolled through Baltimore just as I was ready to GTFO. And 5,000 people with all the equipment that you would ever imagine that they would need to move it down the road. They had semi-trailer trucks full of people's belongings. They had 2 milk crates a piece they could carry. They bring along. There was giant tents. Everybody had their own tents, so there's these huge tent cities going on. There was 3 kitchen trailers, 1 regular, 1 vegetarian, and 1 vegan. They had porta potty trucks. They had their own porta potty pump trucks. They had school buses that actually acted as classrooms because there were so many kids on the march. And it was
that is some incredible dedication to a march.
It was a pretty amazing thing to do, and I was just so blown away and so impressed to see so many people, you know, uprooting their lives and hitting the road and marching to DC for a political statement and purpose. And it was against nuclear weapons. And I immediately went to a thrift store, picked up a sleeping bag, picked up some clean clothes, and joined that march, and walked with them to DC. And it was the weekend of political demonstrations and civil disobedience and people throwing their shoes that they had walked across the country with over the White House fence, and concerts. And I met a bunch of people from the march, and met some wild anarchists that I fell in with. And they had this intention of continuing that type of protest, mobile protesting. And so they were able to pull together some funding, and they ended up with one kitchen trailer truck, and one porta potty rack truck, and a big water truck, and several trucks to haul them all. And they formed this small collective called Seeds of Peace. And I joined with them, and that's when I left Baltimore, man, and jumped on board this Peace March train, if you will.
I'm going to pause you right there for 1 second here. Sure. Just to rewind, you mentioned that you are an anarchist under the
Yes,
Libertarian Party. And I just want to get your thoughts on this, because anarchists often get cited as rejecting authority and a form of government. And I just want to better understand, what is your idea of what an anarchist is, and how has it really translated into your libertarian views?
Well, I guess I believe an anarchist is a person who does not believe in the state, does not believe in the need for government, and believes that the government exists to exert control over the individual. And I reject that. I am an anti-authoritarian, indeed. Now, once again, of course, anarchism and anti-authoritarianism is not knee-jerk against authorities or people who are extremely knowledgeable on a subject. It's not inherently against leaders. If somebody has the expertise on a particular subject to fulfill a particular mission or project, then yes, people have every right to happily follow, or follow the lead or leadership of that person. But once that leadership has been used to the extent that it was needed, basically on the person's knowledge or authority on a particular subject, then that person is no longer the leader. That it doesn't carry over that they are the leader of everything.
Right.
So
how does the state operate in that sense? If I'm not sure what type of a government that would be, but how would a state operate without any form of government, essentially?
Well, once again, it's a utopian notion.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I don't think will ever happen, but it's something that we are working towards as anarchists and minarchists. And it's like a vision of what a post-state society might look like. And I suppose it would look maybe very similar to society now, but very different in important ways, I guess, in that it would be considerably more decentralized. It would be more localized. It would be more focused on family and community. I believe that as an anarchist and as an anarchist libertarian now, I believe the same things essentially. That the only way that we can really ever disengage fully from the state is to come together and create the parallel functions and institutions that the state tries to provide and usually fails, or does so in a very inefficient manner.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people equate anarchy with chaos and like that, but ultimately, anarchism is a very high form of order. Are you familiar with the rainbow gatherings at all?
I am not.
Okay, well, I'll give it to you in a nutshell. Essentially, imagine, if you will, 4,000 people in a big field out in the woods in a big meadow, and they're in concentric circles, and they're there for dinner, and they all have their own cup and bowl, because that's the way you're supposed to make it happen. And all of a sudden, out of the woods, from upwards of 100 different individual kitchens, come representatives bearing 5-gallon buckets of food produced in these kitchens, and they go down to these people wait in circle, and they start going around the circle and methodically sharing the food with all of the people. At this same dinner circle, individuals start going around, sort of town criers, giving people important information, what they need to know about health and safety, and information about parking or the police or anything of that sort. And things like that. And then another little musical group will go around passing the magic hat. And the magic hat is where people will toss in their money voluntarily because it's a free event. It's a non-commercial event. You can't buy anything, you can't sell anything there, but you can throw your money into the magic hat, and it's a spiritual money laundering, if you will. So it goes all the way around, then it goes to the center of the circle. A banking council is there. They count the money. They make an announcement of how much was brought in. Anybody can be on banking council. It's completely transparent. The next morning, kitchen council forms, like they send down representatives. It's sort of a spokes council. And so they put in their orders for food. They talk about what things they might need to talk about. And then they interface with the supply council, who gets the money from banking council, and they go to town and brings it back. The kitchens get the food and the produce, carry it back to their kitchens and prepare it, and then it goes back down to the circle. Now this happens for over a week, with a week setup and a week breakdown. There's also miles and miles of water hose that has to be laid from springs that are tapped. There's essentially, it's an anarchistic organism. There's 10 to 20,000 people out in the woods and in a national forest every year, in a different national forest around the country. And it doesn't identify as an anarchistic organization or whatever, but essentially there are no leaders. There is no hierarchy. It is a consensus-based, council-based operation. And the only way that anything ever gets done there is because people see the need. It's like, oh, we need some firewood. Who will help me collect some firewood? Oh, we need to saw the firewood. Who will help me saw it? We need to chop vegetables for this evening meal. Who will help us knead the dough for the thousands of dinner rolls? Who will help build the ovens? Who will help build the fire pit? Who will get there early and create the paths and rake and saw and make all these things happen? And the only way that anything happens is because people know that there's a need. They see the need, and they form a group. They call it a council, and they go about making it happen. And that is anarchism. That is an organizational level that is organic, and is people coming together, getting stuff done. It's the same thing that happens after a natural disaster, when the government is not there, and the people are just are forced, but to help each other. They go in, they start cleaning the road, they start checking on the neighbors, they start making little kitchens and things. And the Rainbow Gathering has spun off to do disaster kitchen relief because they have such experience feeding so many in very rustic circumstances, shall we say. And the Rainbow Gathering is also, it's a First Amendment temporary autonomous zone. It's been in conflict with the government for many, many years. The government coming up with permit schemes and spending up to $1 million a year on an incident command team that goes in and sets up illegal roadblocks and tickets people for this and gets people all riled up. And one time in Wyoming, they came in and started to make an arrest in Kitty Village where all the kids were, and they pepper sprayed. They fired pepper balls at the crowd. It's a long and storied event, but it continues to happen. It may not happen this year because many of the kitchens are very concerned about the COVID, but nonetheless, we'll be back stronger than ever next year. And it's where I learned to be a clown. It's where I sharpened all my clowning and goofing around skills. And also, after a few years of doing the Rainbow Gatherings, it's where I understood that we provide our own security also. That's one of the things that we do because it's a need, and we want to run a safe gathering. And so that's essentially, a lot of times it's a lot of crisis intervention, but a lot of times it's sort of a glorified camp counselor, if you will. But one of the functions that we provide as a peacekeeping, or Shanti Sena, as we culturally appropriate some Sanskrit for it, is police escorts. We escort the police, and that is where early on I would spend 8 hours a day walking with 10 cops. They could be feds, they could be state cops, they could be local cops, but trying to smooth things out, keep them out of trouble, keep the hippies out of trouble. We shout out 6 up to warn the people that the cops are in the vicinity. And that's where I would, bring in my clowning skills into this crisis intervention situation. and also into these police encounters. And so I would make fun of them, have fun with them, while propagandizing them and sincerely trying to contextualize and explain to them what they were experiencing. And this was very successful because a lot of times they'd come in all ramrod straight, and because they'd been lied to about what was going to happen and all this shit. And so that is where I learned to deal with cops.
I want to pause you right there, though. Just going back to those events you were part of and thinking about it conceptually, it makes sense on a smaller scale. But when it comes to the idea of libertarianism or anarchy, you have to ask yourself if one of the fundamental issues with it is that everything will work out, or at least much better than it is now if we just let all people be, rational actors in their own self-interest without government telling us what to do. So the question, Vermin, really becomes how many people are really rational in that sense if you were to scale up something like this to statewide or countrywide. You can't assume that every single person is going to fall in line with this logic and is going to follow the golden rule.
Absolutely. And that's why I think anarchism and certain parts of libertarianism, even in the platform, it's predicated on people acting in their rationally and altruistically and nicely and full of love and all. And so, yes, that is true. And I think that just speaks to our optimism and belief in people being good at heart. Now, back at Rainbow, for example, because there is no mechanism to prevent people from going there, yes, there are predators that show up sometimes. And yes, sometimes bad things happen. And yes, sometimes terrible things happen. And we as a community attempt to deal with these things. We are about restorative justice, and if at all possible, and we always try and offer an actual council. It could be however many people want to join it in order to work through these situations. And of course, that's relatively easy or low impact if it's like some dispute between neighbors or between camps. But sometimes things are really hairy or very serious things happen. And we do our best to make sure that the person who has been on the wronged end has their opportunity to speak their heart song to the person who has aggrieved them. And we try, as a group, try and break it down and make sure that the person understands what they did was wrong, and try and offer them ways for them to make it right. Other times, other solutions are conceived of. It's like, well, we don't want this person. If this person's alone, we don't really trust that, but we don't necessarily have a mechanism to like get them out of there. Maybe they will have an escort. I have literally tied a string on myself to another person that I was babysitting, essentially.
So the buddy system.
So yeah, so I mean, so there's a lot of creativity and possibilities. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. We always offer the person who has been wronged, if it rises to such a level that if they want to, file a report with the authorities, then we will help facilitate that, as is their right. And yes, I mean, how would that work in a more at large society? I mean, I guess it would come down to community watches, people keeping an eye on each other's things. Perhaps it would create a new level of sort of a different type of court system. Because a lot of even the regular court systems now are offering different types of sentencing that are not jail, but like an alternative courts that are offering different weird creative sentences and that type of thing. So yes, I mean, now could it be scaled up, or do we need to scale society down?
Hmm.
I mean, yes, I often question, can such a thing be scaled up to the point where it fills a nation state or whatever? But like I said, I think it would be ultimately have to be something that was working on a more local community
Hmm.
basis. And once again, it's a vision that I don't know if I'm going to live to see or will ever be, but it's something that I do believe in
Hmm.
as an anarchist. It's a desirable thing to work towards.
What about this? What is wrong with the current system that libertarianism can fix, and how does it fix it?
Well, a lot of the libertarian solutions, I guess, involve getting the government out of it. And of course, for a lot of people, that simply seems a little counterintuitive
Hmm.
on some levels. But like mass incarceration, for number one, it's a huge, terrible, horrifying problem in our society. And the simplest libertarian solution is ending the damn war on drugs simply by making all drugs decriminalized or legalized. Um, Much like the Portugal model, which is a shining example of something might work in the real world, where their addiction rates went down, where their usage rate went down, and overdose. Yes, so and that would immediate and pardoning all the offenders who were convicted of crimes that had no victims,
Hmm.
gambling related or sex work related or drug related, where there was no victim, there was no individual who was wronged, and yet these people are put in a cage um, at the point of a gun, and the military, the prison industrial complex has become a huge, giant, massive lobbying entity that's more business, where it's like the private prisons have the contracts with the people with the different states, and they have to keep they have to keep making up more crime, they have to keep arresting more people in order to fulfill their contracts, to fill the jails and the prisons in order. It's for example, I mean, that's just one thing, for example. And by ending the black market on illicit substances, um, boom, there is no black market, so there's no no gang activity, because it's
Hmm.
everything's easily accessible for those who really want them. And of course, libertarians aren't encouraging everybody to go do drugs or get addicted. No, it's like we also fully believe that people are fully responsible for the decisions they make, and we're not going to judge them for those, but we certainly want people to be responsible for their habits or activities.
The
Uh,
drug war one you mentioned is very interesting, though, because I can't speak for the example you mentioned with the Portugal one, but I know there are some European countries that legalize drug use and provide individuals with clinics, I think, with
oh yeah,
clean
shooting
needles.
galleries and stuff. Sure.
Right.
I mean,
And
I
those
would touch
work for them.
safe injection sites.
Right. And those work for them because if you have a free market where drugs are legal in those countries, people can freely sell drugs. It decreases violence. People are easily or have easy access to those drugs, so they don't have to spend their own money or put themselves in a situation where they can get hurt or anything like that. So I guess,
Or,
like what you're
or,
saying, it does
or
work.
some countries even provide those addicted with the drugs. I
Hmm.
believe. And so there's that. I mean, it's all about harm reduction, and locking people up for a medical situation or an economic decision that harms no one other than themselves, perhaps, and
Hmm.
on a limited basis. I mean, I know people who have addicted family members. It's not easy, and like I say, we're not encouraging that, but it's just one solution that would uh, affect that problem. For the A lot of people are like, oh, you know, libertarians are not necessarily against universal health care. Yeah, we're against Medicaid for all. We're against the government attempting to run a program. I mean, the health care is 30% cost is purely bureaucratic. It's purely paperwork. We just believe that there's other ways, and that the market will do it in a more efficient manner. And now, once again, of course, no, we don't want the big corporations to be running slipshod over everybody. No, not at all. I mean, because most of the people who have a real gripe with capitalism, it's more about corporate crony capitalism, but more about this government capitalism fusion where the government's picking the winners and the losers and subsidizing. Say for example, just the subsidies to the fossil fuel industry that the government's been involved in for many years, subsidizing the exploration and just the oil companies, covering their business expenses so that they can sell their product that was deemed as desirable or essential, but is now obviously causing terrible environmental climate consequences.
So it's taking the control out of the hands of the government and giving it back to the people to make their own decisions and to operate as a free market. Is that right?
I believe that's accurate. Yes.
So I want to kind of turn the focus right now to your current presidential campaign in 2020. And I want to point to a specific quote here, if I may. It
Sure.
says, "This is my first legitimate, actual, bona fide, real campaign. In the past, I ran as a Democrat and was not a Democrat. I ran as a Republican and was not a Republican. Right now, I'm a libertarian and seeking the Libertarian Party nomination." So I want to understand here, is this run more serious than before?
Ah,
And do examples such as your 2012 uh, glitter bombing of Randall Terry or your onboarding of 3 former Andrew Yang's team members onto your team or providing a VP in Spike, does that have any implications on how you are running your current campaign?
well, once again, essentially, yes, I ran 30 years of satirical campaigns for the presidency from '92 up through 2016,
Mhm.
um, and they weren't real. Once again, I mean, they crossed over. They crossed over into real world. I mean, obviously, I'm a real person. I exist in the physical plane. I was campaigning. In real world. I was
Right.
interacting in this real world. I was on the ballot in real world and came in third and fourth on the New Hampshire primary ballots in 12 and 16, respectively. And so, it was real in that sense, that it was physically real, that it just wasn't an internet thing, but it wasn't an actual campaign. Now, what makes this one different, I think, which is your question,
Mhm.
is that if I had my druthers and I was not recruited, I was recruited, and that is what makes it very different.
Really? Wow.
A year and a half ago, my campaign manager, Desiree Lindsay, who I had met briefly in 2016 at the Libertarian National Convention, at which I was sort of still pretending to run for it. But she reached out and she asked me if I was interested in running a more serious campaign. And after some serious consideration as to what that would entail, and obviously, it would entail considerably more effort. In all my previous campaigns, it was like about a week to 10 days up in the New Hampshire primary. Boom, got all my media. Would go to the conventions, the RNC, the DNC conventions. For maybe a week apiece, boom, need to do crowd control, riot cop, clown control, and stuff, and then in riot world, and then maybe the inauguration. So essentially, it's like maybe 4 weeks out of a year every 4 years, and
Mhm.
just doing that over and over again, it just gave me this level of notoriety um, in the media and in the general public, um, that I feel that I can make this offer to the Libertarian Party. But yes, I was recruited. I was asked if I wanted to do this and actually seriously seek the Libertarian Party nomination. And to that, I agreed. And now I have a campaign staff of easy dozen people hardcore, and another couple dozen that are doing various tasks and state things, and it consists of not exclusively, but mainly and mostly of principled libertarians, activists who have been involved in the LP or who have returned to the LP to work with me on my campaign, and from the left and the right. And that's a beautiful thing. And they, that is how I know it's a serious campaign, quite frankly, because these people support me. I have supporters in the LP. I have a great base in the LP, and I have people who get what I'm doing, know what I'm doing, understand what I'm doing, and believe in their hearts that it is a feasible or desirable way for the Libertarian Party to propel itself forward into the future, especially based on my massive appeal that skews mainly young. I think, and we believe that we can bring in a lot of young people.
Right, but you mentioned that you have support from both the left and the right. But for your supporters that are on the far left and the far right and in between, is that something that would be concerning to you?
Well, it depends how far you're going. I mean, I
Mhm.
gotta, because in 2012, because that particular the glitter bombing video, it was not perceived to be partisan. I wasn't coming out against any party. I wasn't coming out against any particular candidate, and so it was embraced across the political spectrum. And
I
yeah,
see.
and because it was so accessible, and because people think it's funny, and it did bleed over into some pretty frightening places, and I've been trying to address that when I can. Obviously, I believe I'm a nonviolent activist. As a member of the Libertarian Party, I've accepted the non-aggression principle that violence is illegitimate and can only be used in defense of the self or property. And tankies. I'm concerned about tankies. I'm certainly concerned about neo Nazis and people on that far side, on those far ends. And yet, I do know that I do have fans there. I mean, at the Straight Pride Parade, for example, I was out protesting it and dogging them and trying to rebrand it as the douchebag pride. And yet I had fans who were on the other side,
Right.
and they were trying to communicate with me, and the resist Marxism free speech rallies that they had in Boston Commons. Sampson is calling me out from the stage, and weird memes pop up sometimes from weird places aimed at weird places, and all I can do is constantly affirm
Mhm.
my fascist, anti-authoritarian beliefs.
So I
And
have to I have to ask though, Vermin,
yes,
what do you and your team see as kind of the ideal ratio of satire to seriousness in this election to kind of address this? Because the way I see it, wouldn't people misconstrue some of your antics, so to speak, and kind of side on the far right or far left because of that? So how do you kind of address the ratio of being serious versus satirical nature of work?
I don't know if the ratio has any impact on the right or left dichotomy. Uh, what I have ended up, I mean, because what I've been doing for so long is also very fluid on the streets or in interviews. A lot of times, I will crack wise. I'll talk about ponies because people love to pretend. But then I'm also just as quickly to go into drop the fourth wall, drop the character, and start discussing what I really believe in.
Mhm.
And in this particular campaign, during all the debates, the libertarian debates, a number of which have had no novelty headwear restrictions, and so I started to work without the boot, which is a little weird, but because I'm trying to prove how darn serious I am as a candidate, I'm more than happy to do it. Um, yeah.
But
So
don't you think your campaign is one that resonates with most young voters today because of the boot or
Oh,
because of the toothbrush?
I agree. No, once again, if I'm the nominee, I will definitely make use of the boot. There's no doubt about that. But because
Mhm.
what I'm trying to accomplish is sort of this in-house sale where I'm trying to convince the delegates that I am a serious person, or a much more a more serious person, um, to try and to gain their support. I mean, I
Mhm.
think they understand that the boot is the hook, and of course, I mean, if I'm the nominee, and then how can I not get 15% polling if that's going to get me into the debate? And how could you not want me on stage with the boot on my head, with Biden and Trump? Would be the would be the climax of such a thing. Um, but it's pushed me to sort of stretch myself as a communicator, to be able to not be afraid to shift gears. I think during most of the debates I was happy and I'm happy to throw down a quip, throw out my funny lines about different issues, and then pivot it right back to the Libertarian Party platform.
How confident are you about debating your policies, satire aside, against someone like Trump or Biden?
The LP platform, I would stack it up against uh, the Republican or Democratic platform any day.
I saw this written by someone somewhere, I think it was on Reddit, but there was a comment that said, "One thing I'm sure many have noticed is that your campaign, being Vermin's, strategy of saying bizarre and non sequitur things and wearing something silly on his head is similar to Donald Trump, and it has worked out very well."
So there is that. I mean, I think there's a video online where I claimed that I paved the way for Donald Trump, and that became,
Yeah.
which of course is just bullshit. But I was, but they used it up anyway because it was sizzly and sexy. So yeah, it's definitely a communication strategy. I definitely believe it's successful. I definitely believe in the power of humor and satire to as a weapon against the duopoly. I do believe that it can successfully be used as a tool of outreach and education, and spreading the word of liberty, and all that good stuff, and freedom, and anarchy. And once again, of course, the Libertarian Party is a party of anarchists and minarchists. I mean, you don't get, don't forget the minarchists. And I'm not afraid. I'm not averse to playing the minarchist advocate because for a lot of people, no government is just so beyond their comprehension. I'm happy to drop back and say, well, okay, maybe I'll play minarchist. Maybe we need a little bit of government just to accomplish that particular end.
Would you say your 2012 platform still stands at all today in the ironic sense of I'm a tyrant that you can trust, or has that really shifted?
Well, I think it's, I mean, that's my act, I guess. I mean, that's a part of the different things that I say that are, my pre-recorded, preset campaign stump speech. I'm Vermin Supreme, the friendly fascist, a tyrant you can trust. Let me run your life because I know what is best for you. So I think that what I'm implying is still as accurate and true as ever. That everybody who wants to run for some office ultimately wants to run your life, and that you should just let them.
Mhm.
Um, I've the friendly fascist tagline. That haunts me a little bit because some of the fascists latch onto it. So there's.
You had a video out a while ago in which you kind of broke down your voter base, and the concept behind it sounded pretty logical because the numbers that you accounted were pretty solid when it came to stacking against other candidates. Can you
Oh
talk a
yes,
bit more
I
about
think
that?
3.9 million high school kids graduate a year. 3.9. So give me two of those years, class of 19, class of 20. That's almost 8 million people. Add that to the 17 million plus college kids, and that's a pool of 25 million potential voters. And if I were to be able to get 1 out of 4 of them kids to vote for me, that would equal 6.5 million, or that equals 5% of the last general election. So yeah, those are definitely figures that I like to throw out. I like to throw out that, of course, there's 100 million plus people who did not vote, who were disgusted, disaffected, disillusioned, who might be energized and might enjoy a Vermin Supreme campaign as a big FU to get on board. And of course, the thousands of different subcultures in America, everything from comic cons to roller derby girls to cryptocurrency nerds to just all Magic the Card players. It all comes under this geek nerd culture. Furries, bronies, and of course they are my natural constituents because I'm a meme, and they get that shit.
Does that concern you though? I know we're going back here to the far left, far right concern, but does it concern you that that is sort of your main voter base? Because if you're trying to make your campaign follow under, I guess, a more serious platform, but you kind of align yourself with those who kind of view as, anti-government or falling under certain categories, does that concern you at all?
I got my only real concern. I think the only real critique of my strategy may be the youth vote and getting the youth to vote. I mean, getting my youth base to the polls to vote. I think I think that's valid, and we're working on strategies like that. But it's not just the youth that I appeal to. I'm intergenerational in a sense at this point. Having come up into the nation's zeitgeist in 2012. Obviously, that was a few years back, and a lot of those people are older now, and are teachers now. They teach me in a lot of high schools. A lot of the kids get back to me and tell me that, oh yeah, my high school teacher loved you, and you should.
So I guess what I'm asking here is, do you think that the groups you kind of appeal to, do they understand the realities of some of the politics that are going on, that what you're trying to achieve is greater than just anti-government?
I think so. I certainly think that's what I've been attempting to communicate with my various fans and peeps all around. I mean, I've really, because I've in my LP run, and once again, I've attended so many state conventions over the past 2 years. We raised more money than I had spent previously on all my other campaigns combined. I've been involved in all these debates, and if it wasn't a serious campaign, I would not have done any of those things, quite frankly. So am I concerned? Mildly, but I've during all of a part of my new messaging has been really hammering and steering people towards the Libertarian Party platform, lp.org/platform. Up in New Hampshire primary, I was mobbed, swarmed. It was very interesting because some campaigns really like me and some do not. The Biden campaign hated me because we were dogging him pretty hard. Elizabeth Warren, she refused to have a selfie with me, even though I was first in line, and her people hated me and her staff. But other campaigns very much enjoyed me. Tulsi's campaign welcomed me with open arms. Wanted to know if they could do anything for me. I get to ask Tulsi a question about if she'd ever has the LB platform and like that, and what she was going to name her pony, of course. And the Yang kids certainly all got me and enjoyed me, and the Bernie people were phenomenal. I mean, when he did his he did a thing at the University of New Hampshire, and I made a selfie record. Within an hour, there was like 1,000 selfies. Literally, it was amazing the amount of just people swarming me on that one. And kids are what the kids are. They call themselves polyflexible, and that means they're politically flexible. And they're kids. They're looking for things that make sense. They're looking for solutions. They're looking to make the world better. They're and it's very easy, I think, for them to say, oh yeah, everybody should have health care. Yeah, Medicare for all, and but they hadn't really necessarily thought it through. UBI, great idea. Free college, great idea. But they need to. I don't believe they've fully looked into how that is. How they'll be paying for that in the long.
They just want to make the world a better place.
Yes, and they do, and kids are naturally anti-authoritarian, and they're naturally nonconformist, and they do want to make the world a better place, and they question why the world is the way it is, and that's what I have in common with them, and that is what libertarians have in common with them, and that's why I think it's sort of a natural fit, and they could.
So, what would you tell them if they ask you what would be your three top priorities as president to make the world a better place? What would they be to you?
For me, I think we would, ending the wars, I think is probably a really high priority for any libertarian candidate. Pulling the troops home immediately, ending the foreign wars, boom, that frees up all sorts of crazy trillions of dollars. And the prison industrial complex and the mass incarceration here at home,
Hmm.
and the attendant police state that is required is the cause and effect. The police state is the cause of mass incarceration and is the effect of mass incarceration, and the militarization of the police departments, and all of these things. And once again, the amazing amount of laws that make you a criminal. I remember one of my early quips. I think it was the mandatory toothbrush law. It was like, remember, it's for you and your children's safety. Remember, no one's a criminal until we say you are. And it's true. They can make a law tomorrow to make you a criminal. I mean,
Right.
it's weird. Especially like cannabis. I mean, how many Americans were breaking the law every day? Every day. I was breaking the law every day for years and years because I was consuming a harmless plant of, harming no one other than myself, if that.
Hmm.
I mean, that Jiminy, that's just crazy. I mean, that's just one thing, and it is still not completely legal in all the states, and
It's
that.
not, but times have changed. There's a lot of states out there that have fully legalized it or at least partially legalized it. So it's quite interesting to see how things have kind of shifted from the full criminalization of marijuana to partial to full legalization in some places.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, things have definitely changed. Things do change, and we can make things change. I mean,
Hmm.
gay marriage. People marrying who they could want to, and that. How recent is that? I mean,
Very
truly,
recent, very recent. It
that's
wasn't like
very
this 15 years ago.
yeah, yes, and I mean, just things like that. These sea changes that can occur, that need to occur. I want these things to occur, and I want to try and be a catalyst for that if I can. Uh, and I've just been, very lucky that I find myself in a position where I can, where people give a fig what I have to say,
Right.
but by wearing a boot on my head and talking crazy, right?
And sometimes
So,
it's sometimes that's what you need to do to get people's attention. Be the
absolutely.
crazy one, be the one that stands out in the world.
Yeah, for sure. And my campaign team and staff and supporters fully believe that it is definitely the most effective way to present our message. And once again, and let me talk about the framing, of course, because I do. There is concerns about, can a serious party put up somebody who may very well be acting as in the capacity of a joke candidate and
Hmm.
not be considered a joke party? And I believe that it totally, totally can, and it is totally in the framing. And it's just something as simple as owning the freaking joke, owning it 100%, putting out the statement, yes, we are the Libertarian Party. We are a serious party. We've been around for close to 50 years, and we have ideas and a platform that is for the betterment of America. However, pivot, the duopoly presidential election cycle has indeed turned and risen to the level of a joke. And with love and with spite, here is Vermin Supreme. Boom. Hashtag in on the joke, and I believe that inoculates, the party against. Say, anytime anyone says, "Oh, Libertarian Party's a joke," no, that's our joke, and we're joking on you. We put
Hmm.
up the joke.
I have to ask this because a lot of people I've talked to have been wondering this before I got on my interview with you. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Joe Exotic. He was one of the main
Yeah,
individuals on the documentary Tiger King, but people want to know what your thoughts on him are as he ran for the governor of Oklahoma under the Libertarian Party.
Well, once again, that essentially comes down to the fact that in America, anybody can run for president. It's a self-declarative statement. Once you say you're running for president, essentially you are. Nobody can say you're not because you said you were. You don't have to get votes. You don't have to, get money. You don't have to file with the FEC. But it becomes an indisputable fact.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the beautiful things about the Libertarian Party is anybody can run for any office and say they're a libertarian, whether they espouse libertarian ideals or ideas or not necessarily, because there's no real vetting committee. I mean, yes, sometimes there's primaries, but if somebody's not being primaried, you could say you're running as a libertarian for governor or mayor of your town, and nobody could really. There's the Libertarian Party couldn't say no, stop, no, you're not. So Joe Exotic, obviously a very interesting character, very flawed human being, but I have my questions as to whether he was actually a proponent of libertarianism or libertarian ideas. I mean, many people who are just like against the government or on whatever level, or believe in this or that or the other thing, call it. They identify themselves sometimes as libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
And but for members of the Libertarian Party, it's a very specific subset, or perhaps part of the spectrum. And of course, a thing also that people don't always understand immediately, and it took me a long time to figure things like this out before I even was comfortable enough to become a libertarian, was that it's not a right-leaning monolith. It has its own internal left-leaning or right-leaning wings, if you will, or spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And it just that fact alone sort of blows a lot of people's minds. They have to reassess what they.
So it's moderate to you.
Pardon?
You would say it's more moderate. It falls between left and right.
It's above left and right. Left and right is one line, and then if you add another point, I guess you create a plane, but it's not necessarily in this, in the three dimensions. Just because you have a third point,
right?
Doesn't mean that in that plane it's between the other 2 points. So yes, that the Venn diagram that overlaps with the libertarian principles and Libertarian Party platform does overlap with people's inherent beliefs, parts of them, probably from the both sides. I mean, the Republicans are attracted to us calling for the reduction of regulatory setups and less government and all that, and more liberally minded people are certainly attracted to our full-on respect for the rights and decisions of the individual. Anti-war activist, obviously attracted to our massive anti-war, our anti-police state. When I asked at the New Hampshire primary again, when I asked Tulsi Gabbard if she had read the Libertarian Party platform, she indicated that she had not, but he immediately pivoted to a very impassioned anti-war and pro-civil liberties rant.
Oh.
So without even reading the platform, she immediately, she understood at least enough to do that.
Mm-hmm. She understood some of the ideals that were part of the Libertarian Party. I see.
Now, of course, there's certainly other parts of the Venn diagram that are outside. We're pro-gun rights, and she's still against, and all that. But once again, I think it's enough to bring us together on some level and allow us to perhaps discuss more civilly our differences.
Right. I never personally understood the purpose of having a Democratic and Republican Party because in my eyes, and granted, I never followed politics intently when I say this, have two parties on the opposite spectrum of a belief system has caused a great deal of contention and divide in America. I mean, isn't America kind of the land of the free? And in other words, why do we have certain parties dictating immigration, abortion,
and gun control policy, for example. Wouldn't it be a better model if individuals lived and let live under the golden rule?
Yeah, I mean, if they get the government out, I mean, that's our platform plank. People may have a conscientious, disagreement, a full-on disagreement with, but the government should not be involved in that decision.
Mm-hmm.
The government should not be involved in marriage. It should not be involved in a lot of things that it seems to have involved itself in.
Mm-hmm.
We want to prune that shit back. I got my pruning shears right.
Let me ask you this, Vermin, just to kind of stray off that a bit. How do you and your staff go about running a campaign during a time like this where social distancing measures are in place?
Well, essentially, we get a little leg up on I think, some of the competition with our social media outreach. I've got like what 100,000 followers on our Facebook page. Another 50K on my own personal page, and probably another 10 or so elsewhere. I've got like 11 million hits on the hashtag Vermin Supreme and Vermin Supreme for President on TikTok and Twitters, and but of course we're just trying to put out more content, and naturally, because we are still seeking the nomination, we are a lot of delegate outreach at this point. I'm actively attempting to phone all the delegates, because I heard Justin Amash was calling delegates, so I figured I better get my ass in gear and start calling delegates, because ultimately that's what it will likely come down to. Of course, that's unclear too. In a perfect world, it'll be a live convention, and we will get the delegates that we need. If on second or third or first ballot, I don't know. I don't know the politics. I'm not too big on the whole horse trading and all this strategic political maneuvering. But that's how I know my campaign's real, because my campaign staff really is, and they know that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I've found myself to be one of the front runners in the race. I mean, so there's that. I mean, if I never would have thought that I would be a serious, borderline, real life politician in a million years. I'd never thought that. And I certainly never thought that I'd be seeking the Libertarian Party nomination for realsies.
It's a crazy world, Vermin. Anything can happen.
Yeah, true that.
So we're running up on time here today, but I wanted to end things with a couple of quick fire questions for you.
Sure.
So the first question is, I personally haven't used the app yet myself, but since starting a TikTok account, you have reached over 130,000 followers. What has that experience been like for you?
It's pretty funny, and like I say, there's 11 million hits on the hashtags. I mean, that's like going viral or something. And it's just great. I mean, I like reaching out to the kids. I think I appreciate the fact that what I do works on the levels that includes that kids they know it's a joke, they know it's funny, and whether they or not they totally get the joke just yet, that's okay. That's what that's the hook.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not sure, because obviously I've never really tried to monetize such a thing. I've never tried to monetize my channels or anything like that, and so it's just sort of this natural extension of what I've been doing, and it's much like this being a real presidential run. It's just it's natural extension. It just feels very real, and my growth on social media. I mean it's interesting. It's a thing. It's it's humbling and pretty cool and all those things. But one of the nice things about my celebrity, if you will, for many
Mm-hmm.
years, if I didn't have the boot on my head, no one would recognize me.
It's true.
That's still pretty true. I mean, I could walk across any college campus in America without the boot, and I'm just some old guy. But if I put the boot on, boom, everybody knows me. And that's sort of the way I've liked it. We'll see what happens if I get the nomination, but it's just okay.
That brings me to my second question here. You have the boot. You have the toothbrush. You
Mhm.
have the bullhorn. You've been part of many rallies. You've disengaged protesters and police from one another.
Oh yes.
What is it about humor that has been such an instrumental tool for you over the years?
Well, I think it's just, I am funny when I'm funny. I'm pretty effing serious, but I just have been blessed this random DNA. And I think I got a good sense of humor from my mother, and I just found it to be the most effective way to communicate and put across deep ideas, and spoonful of sugar. And of course, when it comes to breaking tension, and especially in riot world, when things get super tense, and I can go in there and start cracking jokes on the cops, come out with your hands up and your pants down, I have you surrounded. And it changes reality. I mean, essentially, I believe that I have discovered a magical way that I can literally change the course of reality. Where I can change the direction of the time stream we go in, by bringing forth this humor. And of course, the fact that the absurdist part of it, and the surreal part of it, and the creating this slight cognitive dissonance, setting it up, and that's another way, like the Zen masters who used to, sometimes literally slap their students upside the head to try and get them to achieve enlightenment. And yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's magic. Love is magic. Mutual aid is magic. Voluntarism is magic. Charity is magic. I've been really trying to bring these values to the forefront of my presidential campaign in the LP. I believe that they are messages that are sometimes not associated with libertarianism. For many years, as a left anarchist, I'm so down with mutual aid. But for years, I was afraid of even trying to explain to libertarians why I felt their reliance on charity I found a little offensive, because it's for me, it was perceived to be such a top-down throwaway. And I was afraid that if I told them the importance of mutual aid, that they would co-opt the term. But here I am years later, and I am actively pushing it forth as part of my vision. And I have found that there are many libertarians who fully understand that and agree with that, and they are a charitable group. They do. In 2012, when our campaign headquarters was at this woman's house, and she had been in an accident, and she had been in a wheelchair, and it was the libertarian community that came together and helped her back onto her feet, so to speak, and helped her create her own job in reality, and all of these things. And that was a defining moment for me, and reassessing my understanding of what libertarians were when I saw that particular act of compassion. It's like, okay, because I was prejudiced, like a lot of people who have these prejudgments and these preconceived notions and stereotypes in their minds about what something is. And for me, it was like, oh, those greedy bastards, or just in it for themselves. I got mine. Fuck you. All those negative tropes that people have about libertarians. And I believe that I am positioned in a very good place to help dispel those misconceptions and put forth the libertarian principles, which ultimately are compassionate. Although when some of the candidates go, oh, we're going to end Medicaid tomorrow, going to end Social Security tomorrow if I'm president, and all that stuff, and it's like, dudes, if you guys don't present some sort of alternative vision of a transition or something, people aren't gonna appreciate that.
Right. People aren't going to take it seriously, essentially.
No, it sounds radical. It is radical. And they think of themselves as radical, and that's fine. You can be a radical, but you have to sell your radical ideas to people who aren't radical.
So that brings me to my third question here. If you could share a brief message with the listeners out there, what would it be?
Once again, I would steer you towards lp.org/platform. That's Libertarian Party platform. It's what I'm repping. It's what I'm shilling. You know, if you're going to run for a party nomination, you got to at least push what they're about. So I and see what you like about it, see what you can hang with, and see if see if it makes sense to you all in all. Preamble is on and all that. Go to Verminsupreme2020.com, of course. Check out my take on we've got some crazy policies going on there, and got the merch store and all that stuff. And take care of yourselves, of course. This is a highly stressful time. I think it's clear that the government was ill-equipped to be prepared or respond in an efficient manner to something like this. So I think you should check that off on your checklist on things that the government can't or isn't willing to do for you, and realize that it's your friends and neighbors who have been checking up on you, and it has been in your family. It hasn't been the government. Government has been knocking on your door. Hi, how you doing? Can I get anything for you? I know you're in isolation, but I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help. Groceries, you say? No. And they've just been making it harder for people in a lot of ways, and sort of screwed up the whole pandemic and whatever. I could go on with the less regulatory measures that prevented the testing kits and blah blah blah, and the broken healthcare system that it could be whatever. No, we don't have that kind of time. So I'm just going to take it back to what has gotten us through this trying time. What has is getting us through this crisis, and that is, and once again, I got to jump to anarchists. We're not anti-authoritarian, but we pay attention to medical advice and the best information and best practices. Oh yeah, well, I'm not going to not wash my hands just because the man is telling me to do that. No. We're happy to listen to that, but understand that once again, it hasn't been the government checking up on you. It's us. It's people checking on people. It's people helping people. It's people who are still committed to going to work and risking themselves to help people. And of course, those that are forced to by circumstances. But it's the mutual aid. It's the charity.
Mm-hmm.
It's volunteerism. And we need to realize as we, come out of this hibernation, as we come out of this, our cocoons into the future, what kind of world do we want to see? And so I think it's mutual aid. And let me read this little piece to you that my friend Ryan wrote, and I recorded, and we made it into a little commercial. It's not too cheesy, but if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
Let us not let it go back to the way it was. Let us not let ourselves go back to the way we were. Let us heal. Let us work together. Let us look to the future. Let us make a better world now together. We don't have to go back to the old world. Disruption leads to innovation and change. Innovate now. Change now. Disrupt now. Let us no longer carry the things that do not serve us while we have this unprecedented moment in time. Thank you.
That's incredibly well said, especially in times like these.
Well, 2 more questions here, Vermin, for you. Who would you say inspires you?
Well, a lot of people do, I guess. Some of my biggest influence, I guess, you look back at comics like Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor and George Carlin and activists, the Yippies, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, and just the way they were able to manipulate the media and they pioneered that whole media hijacking publicity stunt stuff. for Pat Paulson, some of the famous, um, fringe candidates and people who've run for president over the years. They're inspirational. Any political movement that the kids unites the kids, that inspires me every time when a large group of kids believes in something. And from the occupiers to the anti-globalization movement back in the day to the anti-nuclear movement that I was involved in, I was coming up in, and
Hmm.
the Black Lives Matter movements, and just all these different movements. And I guess maybe we have to include all of this recent crazy "don't lock us in and we want to breathe on each other" movement. But not so much that one, I guess. But it's like when the kids come together, and I just know it does my heart good, because I know that they are going to be working on these issues. A certain number of them, a lot of them will do totally different things, but there's going to be a group there that stays in touch and stays active and continues working on making the world a better place. And that happens every time one of these movements crops up, and I always find that heartening and
Hmm.
inspiring. I guess
So
yeah.
that brings me to my final question, actually.
Okay.
And that is, what would you say you're trying to show or teach the American people by creating this campaign?
Well, I guess the emperor has no clothes has always been, a part of it, trying to pull back pull back that curtain, and have people once again question why the way things are, um, questioning authority, um, just a different way of looking at things. And
Hmm.
that's my can. Of course, the libertarian part of that, less government equals more freedom, and that we need to take the responsibility for ourselves and for our world and for our planet and for our communities, and come up with our own solutions and our alternate solutions, and solutions that aren't so fully dictated to us by some sort of government structure.
Hmm.
And love and compassion and love. I'm no Marianne. I'm like the Marianne Williamson of the Libertarian Party, but I'm not trying to sell you orbs.
I love the addition of that. If people are interested in learning more about your campaign, getting in touch with you, following you on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, where or how can they reach you at those places?
All right. The bestest place to probably reach the campaign directly would be Verminsupreme2020.com. On the YouTube, my channel, I believe, is called Vermin Supreme. That's weird. I don't know how we got that name, but I guess we got lucky. It's amazing how many people use my name on the internet. Really freaky. On Twitter, at Vermin Supreme. Don't be confused by any of the other million people who use my name in their handle. On TikTok, the real Vermin Supreme. I got there a little late. Somebody grabbed my name, obviously, so that's cool. On Facebook, Vermin Supreme for President, the blue check mark one. That's the official one. Or there's a bunch of other ones, and I think they're all pretty good, I guess. Vermin Supreme's dank meme stash. If you like dank memes, check out Vermin Supreme's dank meme stash on Facebook. I think we got a /Vermin Supreme 2020 on Reddit, maybe. I know we got Instagram. I think it's Vermin Supreme 2020. And there might be another one, Vermin Supreme for President. I think there's a couple there. I think they're both official. I don't think we're on Snapchat so much. I don't think we're on Tinder or Grinder or yet. Let's see, what else am I on? Yeah, those things. Also, if you have not seen the documentary "Who is Vermin Supreme," you should check that out. The full title is "Who is Vermin Supreme: An Outsider's Odyssey." It's available on Vimeo. You can get it other places, but please watch it on Vimeo, because the director and filmmaker gets the cut from that one. And you will like that. And if you like to read books during lockdown, check out iPony, Blueprint for a New America. It's a book about the future long after a Vermin Supreme presidency, after everybody has their pony, zombie power fuels the nation, and the secret dental police have set up checkpoints every couple hundred yards or so. It is a warning from the people of the future to you, the people of your present, their past, that Vermin Supreme is a madman and must be stopped. That's available at iPonythebook.com. And I think that's everything. And just Google me, you know, if you want to see all the videos that other people have made, or read the news articles or all that crap. It's all out there.
I'll make sure to add those links in the description of the episode when it's released. Vermin Supreme, it's been over the top. It's been real. It's been entertaining. You have a very interesting campaign platform, and best of luck.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I'm glad we got to do it. And sorry I didn't get to finish my origin story. Maybe next time. All right.
If you're president, we'll do this again.
All right, for sure. All right, have
care.
a beautiful night. Take care, and peace.
Time is the most valuable thing that a man can spend. Man has time.